Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode in the Neuro-Chemistry series. In this one, I want to talk about leaky gut, or more appropriate named hyper leaky gut, because we all have inevitably a little bit of a leak to our gut. So my name is Dr. Matthew Shim. I'm the owner of Peak Brain Performance Centers here in Colorado Springs. And first I want to start off with this quote by a man you probably know, Mr. Hippocrates. And he says, "All disease begins in the gut." So last time we talked about autoimmunity and the things that are required, or the prerequisites for autoimmunity. And the first thing is just having a genetic susceptibility. So that's more common in people who have close relatives who have some sort of autoimmune condition. The likelihood that you will develop one is a little bit greater. The second one is intestinal hyperpermeability, or the more famous term of leaky gut, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So what is leaky gut? Leaky gut, in this article, they described it as intestinal epithelial cells have developed unique barrier functions that prevent the translocation of potentially hostile antigens into the body. Disruption of the epithelial barrier increases intestinal permeability, resulting in leaky gut. So basically, we have these tight junctions, and the way I think about it is like a wall of bricks. So you have the bricks and then the mortar that holds the bricks together, right? And so these tight junctions, in this article, they talk about tight junctions are an important regulator of the paracellular pathway and allows the passage of water solutes and ions, but under normal conditions, provides a barrier to large molecules. And so we basically, if you think about your intestines, kind of like a screen door. And with a screen door, you can have air and stuff that goes through it, but you can't have large things that pass through it, right? Like strangers aren't going to be walking into your house. A stray cat isn't going to be making its way into your house because there is a barrier and those larger things can't pass through. Well, the same thing is applies true to the intestines. And the way that the intestines work is they work like that screen door. And so we have these tight junctions, which basically allow for smaller particles to make their way through. But what happens is whenever we have damage, and we'll talk about maybe in a later video how there's actually studies that have been done that talk about the connection between the gut and the brain, and how if you have sustained a traumatic brain injury, within hours they actually notice that you have these junctions in your intestinal lining, they start to widen. And so with that, now larger molecules can get through, which aren't supposed to be there. So just like if you had a stranger walk into your house or a stray animal walk into your house, those things are not supposed to be there. And same kind of thing in regards to the tight junctions in your intestinal barrier. Once these larger molecules pass through, then we start to have dysfunction, okay? So the intestinal barrier, it's the regulation of intestinal barrier is crucial to control intestinal permeability, whose increase is associated with chronic inflammatory conditions. So whenever those larger molecules get through, that's where the immune system lies, on the other side of that barrier. And so what happens is we all have a low level of autoimmunity, right? We talked about that in the last video, where we all have this low level of autoimmunity because our immune system is constantly picking at our own tissues and making sure that, like, you know, this tissue here is pancreas, and this one is adrenal, and this one's thyroid. And what happens is whenever these larger molecules get through that aren't supposed to be there, now it's something new that your immune system hasn't seen before. And so it says, hey, I'm going to tag that. I'm not going to let it get anywhere. Well, the problem is that a lot of these, maybe not a lot of them, but there are certain molecules that get through, things like wheat or gluten or GAD, things like that, where they get through and the actual structure of them looks very, very similar to your own tissue. And so that's whenever we developed autoimmune conditions. And this article is talking about how you can develop these chronic inflammatory conditions. And so the question is, what are those chronic inflammatory conditions? So in this article, they talk about celiac disease, diabetes, IBS, MS, obesity, polycystic ovarian syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, coronary artery disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, depression, acute lung syndrome. And these are just some of the things that you can start to develop once you have sustained something that leads to a hyper leaky gut, and then those larger molecules are getting through. So how does this happen? So there are a bunch of different ways, but here's the main ones here. And it's talking about having a low vitamin D levels, low zinc, low glutamine, things like lectins, which are in wheat, rye, barley, oats, corn, and rice, having low glutathione levels. People who have certain food reactivities, like I remember reading an article before, and it was talking about how there's something called aquaporins, which we have in our own tissues, but we also they're also found in things like spinach, soy, corn, and tomato. And with that, there are people who can have reactions to the aquaporin, which is in, let's say, spinach. And when you think about spinach, you think about, hey, spinach is probably good for everybody. In the reality, we're all very, very unique individuals, and we can develop these reactivities to certain things that are unique to us, but different from the person next to us, right? And so I thought that was pretty interesting. Then we have stress. Stress is a big factor. Infections, microbiome imbalances in the gut, alcohol intake, probably more so alcohol abuse, glycoalkaloids, which can be found in potatoes, tomatoes, and peppers. So once you have all this, what do we do about it? So the first thing that you have to do is you have to remove all the foods that create problem. And then you're going to replace those foods with things that are less likely to irritate the gut. So things that I do in my office is I'll put people on a repair diet, which is basically removing a lot of gluten and dairy and soy and sugar and high glycemic index fruits and stuff like that. And it's basically just putting it down to the bare minimum of meats and vegetables and low glycemic index fruits. And then we'll go on that, and then we'll slowly start adding things back. And so let's say that we add in eggs. Then whenever we add in eggs, and we're going to monitor that and see if we have any reactions to that, and just know if we have a reaction to eggs, we know that our barrier is not intact yet, at least to the eggs, right? And we could do that, or you can go down a different route and just do a more expensive food sensitivity panel test like that and go that way too. I prefer just saving your money towards treatment and then going about it that way, and just having the idea that, sure, this repair diet that I propose people on whenever they have these types of situations it's a very restrictive diet, but the key is that it's not permanent, right? And so we're trying to gradually bring things back in. And the thing that I tell all of my patients is, no matter what I give you, whether it's a rehab exercise, a drug, or a supplement, or a dietary recommendation or something like that, the end goal is always to get off of that and get back to the life that you had before you started experiencing XYZ symptoms. So after that, once you clean up your diet, then we have to start repairing the gut and repairing the damage that has taken place with supplements like glutamine, vitamin D, A, butyrate, zinc, omega-3 fatty acids, just to name a few. And then once that happens, and once your tight junctions start to form a little bit tighter, that mortar against those bricks is not letting those large particles of food and different things through your gut barrier, then we're going to repopulate your gut with good bacteria with things like probiotics. So I hope you're able to enjoy that. I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions for me, feel free to email me or give my office a call. Other than that, I will see you in the next one.